League Two hasn't had quite the managerial shenanigans of the Championship, and a little less than League One, but still some stuff that we have to talk about. Going back quite a few weeks to Darrell Clarke's appointment at Bristol Rovers, took them up from the National League, took them up from League Two. This is one of Bristol Rovers' best ever modern managers returning to the club, and a very popular man, and a manager that we both rate very highly. George, there's aspects of the fit that seem a little awkward just based on Rovers' new ownership and the way things have looked and the appointments that they've made up to this point and some of the signings that they've made up to this point. I mean, none of that's worked. It's gone terribly, horrendously well over the last 12 to 18 months. So there's a simpler way of looking at this, which is that they have decided to appoint what they might see as a strong hand on the steering wheel and maybe hand over a bit more responsibility to a manager.
Always have two hands on the steering wheel, mate. Come on.
10 and 2. 10 and 2, baby. What do you make of Darrell Clarke back in at gas?
Mate, first rule of football, never go back. Also, the first rule of football you should ignore because it's nonsense. I think it's a really strong appointment from Bristol Rovers. And when we had a moment the other day where, as we do, we were flitting through League Two squads, and we stopped on a Bristol Rovers page, and we were like, God, that squad is really good for League Two level. And it's not even the case where they're like old talents who've, it's the likes of Sotiriou and Hutchinson. These are players who are in their mid-20s, and there's no way they should be playing League Two football. I think the club made a lot of bad decisions last season in terms of who was leading them. I think the decision to hire Calderon, in hindsight, was ridiculous, and given the position they were in, expecting someone to kind of be parachuted in who had no experience of managing before, and expect him to deliver what they needed to. I mean, I assume when they appointed him, they had higher aspirations than safety, but they ended up getting relegated off the back of it. There is a risk, of course, as we know, that really bad League One teams often turn into really bad League Two teams, and I think mitigating that risk is the most important thing to do. And in hiring Darrell Clarke, it feels very, very unlikely to me they're going to be anywhere near the bottom of League Two next season, regardless of what they get up to in the summer, because Darrell Clarke took a really bad or really poor Cheltenham squad in League One and came in mid-season and turned them into a mid-table team. So I think that the time for complacency is over. I think Clarke is probably suited to this kind of club, as we saw with him at Bristol Rovers in the past, rather than at Barnsley, for example. And the fact that there was an apathy and I guess a despondency around Bristol Rovers, the arrival of a former hero should mean that it's a massive celebration and a homecoming come opening day in August. Whereas anyone else, that wouldn't have been the case. There would have been nerves and trepidation. So yeah, I love this appointment.
Yeah, I assume that outside of MK, who we might mention later on, they should be one of the big boys of the level financially. And it's a squad that, to my eyes, just needs a few bullish additions in key areas rather than 10, 12 signings. And with Clarke hopefully overseeing a kind of change in just general leadership, that should lead to them hitting the ground running. But there's something about the League One to League Two relegation drop that seems to freak teams out quite a lot, and they do seem to find it, as a general rule, quite hard to recover immediately. Obviously not. Port Vale did go straight back up last season, so the precedent is there. Now, Matt Sadler hasn't been sacked by Walsall, and I don't think will be sacked by Walsall. There was a very lengthy statement from the ownership group and Ben Boycott, who fronts it, going through the season and being communicating strongly with the fans. The piece didn't mention Matt Sadler at all, which I thought was quite interesting. Clearly a conscious approach to essentially abscond him, is that the right word? To remove a lot of the blame from Sadler, because clearly the club's collapse has been placed mostly at his feet by the fan base, and the ownership group are clearly making a show of support, albeit in quite a weird way, by just not mentioning his name at all in a 3,000 word statement. So Sadler will be the Walsall manager to start next season. I'm pretty confident of that, and I'm not sure a portion of the fan base are very happy about that, but the decision has been made. But one playoff loser did get sacked, and that was Stuart Maynard by Notts County. There's an interesting few angles here with Stuart Maynard and Notts County, George, and that is that he replaced Luke Williams as the club really slid down the table last campaign, 23-24. They ended up finishing 14th. Maynard then steered them to 6th. They jumped up 8 places under his management in his first full season. By the time they got to the playoffs and lost in them 2-0 on aggregate to Wimbledon, they looked pretty undercooked, by the standards of a top 7 team. But overall, it's not a horrendous season in terms of results. And I do wonder if Maynard might be being slightly harshly treated. I have to admit, I wasn't that convinced by him as a leader. And I wasn't that convinced by the way that the team played. So I can't pretend that I can defend him unbelievably strongly based on what I saw. But I do also think that circumstances around the club mean that maybe it was a bit of a hospital pass for him. And I think might be a bit of a hospital pass for whoever comes in next, because McGoldrick's left, Crowley left in January, Jody Jones hasn't been fit, and his future isn't 100% clear. And I just wonder, what the club's expectations are as a League Two club right now, and what the squad will look like for whoever comes in.
Yeah, I really agree. It feels to me like a lot of minds were made up about Stuart Maynard in that first few months of his tenure when he took over a club kind of in contention for the playoffs in League Two and ended up finishing down the table. I would say that taking over from Luke Williams was a very hard job, given the style of play that Luke Williams implements and his general success, and the fact that he left when results had already started to turn. I don't think it helped Maynard either. And therefore, it always felt like he had to deliver success this season or the knives were going to be out. It's his first full season managing full-time and EFL football. We've seen, whether it's Sadler or Johnny Jackson, even Grant McCann, that after maybe a disappointing campaign, retaining the faith in the manager at League Two level to improve has been a source for success. So, yeah, surprised. I mean, surprised and not surprised. Surprised from purely, I'm surprised that the perception of Maynard isn't better from what he did, but not surprised that he ended up being shown the door, given the noises coming out of the club over the last few months.
The current favourites for the job are Tobias Solberg, Des Buckingham, Liam Richardson, João Alves, and Ian Evatt. I think that reflects nicely that Notts County have operated quite differently to most 4th and 5th tier clubs over the last few years, and I expect that they will continue down that path. I don't see why they would suddenly rip it up and start over again. I am interested from a style of play point of view, where again they've been pretty extreme in the way that they've approached things, and Luke Williams being the manager I think was the main factor in that, rather than some sort of obsession from within the club. So I'll be interested to see whether they double down on the extreme possession-based style and the general shape that's been in position for the last few seasons, or whether they mix it up a bit and let a new manager standardise things a little bit and make some tweaks to approach, and what that will mean to the squad and the way that it gets built this summer. An interesting club to keep an eye on, as are Newport County. They have a replacement for Nelson Jardim. His name is David Hughes. They've hired him from Manchester United, where he was part of the academy coaching staff, had worked at Cardiff City beforehand, and Hugh Jenkins happy to go with an inexperienced manager, because I think as he perceives it, Hughes will be able to deliver on a lot of the things that Jenkins is explicit about wanting and needing to happen for Newport to kind of grow and develop as a club, and that is developing young players. That is ideally being able to recruit young players, ideally young Welsh players. Hughes is Welsh and obviously has ties with the Cardiff Academy, and so presumably good contacts there. That's the pool that Newport are shopping in. Released players from Cardiff and Swansea, loanees, players from the Welsh Prem. They are doing things differently, and frankly, George, the fact that they don't have a big budget for the level by any means, the fact that they are trying to do things very differently, and the fact that they were the third worst team in terms of the league table, finishing just above the bottom two in the end, on underlying numbers, one of the worst League Two teams of the last 5 seasons. I think this is basically the hardest job in the EFL right now. So good luck, David Hughes.
Yeah, good luck, David Hughes, exactly. I kind of liked that. I think when Nelson Jardim, I think it was on his Instagram or somewhere, or maybe he just posted a statement, he kind of said this was job done. I think if you're Nelson Jardim, you just get the hell out of it and you're like, I've delivered safety and I'm going to walk away thinking like, yes, thank you. I've done what I came here to do. I'm now going to walk away and I'm not going to take on this job any further, because as you say, there are massive warning signs. The warning lights are on, they're flashing. Dave Hughes is going to have to come in and try and turn them off. Tough job. And it'll be interesting to see how they approach recruitment this summer, because last year was kind of mad in the way they approached it. It worked to some degree, but as you mentioned, I think they need some quality.
I think what's interesting is, I definitely take your point about warning signs. I just called it the hardest job in the EFL. The thing that I really like about Newport, and what makes me want them to succeed, is at least they're really explicit about the situation that they're in and the way that they're going to approach it. Like, we have one of the smallest budgets in the 4th tier. We don't think we can just do the same thing as everyone else because we can't shop in the same waters. So here's how we're going to try and do things differently to try and raise our status outside of just having loads of cash, which we don't. So I think they do at least they kind of know themselves, or they're able to explain what they're doing and why they're doing it. It doesn't necessarily equate to it being successful on the pitch, because they are going to have to overachieve just to stay in the division again. But there's a part of me that likes the fact that they're not sleepwalking into anything. Like, if they get relegated next season, we might be able to say the approach didn't work, but I still don't think you can really criticise what they're trying to do, because they basically just have to be creative in the way that they do it. Lastly, in League Two, George, explain why the team that finished 19th in League Two last season are the current bookmakers' favourite to win the division. That's the team from Milton Keynes.
Yeah, wrote this up on The Long Shot, our betting newsletter over at ntc20.com. We turned over another 14% return on investment last season. The first episode went out, kind of all season long bets in the EFL, and the first episode went out last week, and it was MK Dons to win League Two. So even though they're favourites, I think that is absolutely right, and they'll continue to shorten, and that is because it seems like money is getting spent at MK. They're obviously bought by a new Q80 consortium a year or so ago. I guess not loads of money's been spent since then, but it feels like now, with Paul Warne at the helm, that is going to change. And Warne is someone who delivers promotions fairly consistently. The signing of Nathaniel Mendez-Lang is crazy good for League Two level, I would say. He's someone who was a massive source of goals and assists and a lot of attacking threat for Derby in their promotion out of League One relatively recently. He was a decent player at Championship level. There are rumours about David McGoldrick, who to my mind has been the best player in League Two for the last 2 seasons. Yes, these are players who are maybe with an older age profile, but I'm not overly worried about that in the short term. So I think you can basically take all your preconceptions about MK Dons and their issues, put them in the bin. It's going to be a very, very different team next season, and I think we'll see more money spent